Hello, everyone. Today I'll be talking about the Arctic pteropod Limacina helicina, also known as the Arctic sea butterfly, and how it will be affected by ocean acidification. But before I get into that, let's go over a couple things. First, they have high densities in polar and subpolar regions. Think 30 to 60 degrees north, and a more local location would be right along here in the California current ecosystem. So this little holoplanktonic calcifier loves the cold. So, phylogenetic information. But before I get into that, so this is what it looks like up close. So this is obviously not to scale. These guys are super, super tiny. So they can be 3 to 5 millimeters depending on the sex and how old they are. So enjoy this beautiful view before I get into the boring taxonomic information. So this little sea butterfly belongs to phylum Mollusca, class Gastropoda. Yes, they are related to our friend the snails. Cohort Euophistiobranchia. Clade Decosomata. So there are two types of theropods. Decosomata are the shell theropods. So as you can see by the tail shell, it belongs to that. And family is Limacinidae, and genus is Limacina. So these guys, there are four forma. You can also think of them as species of this animal. And recently they were reclassified because they were thought to have distribution in Antarctic waters, but it was proved that that is not the case. And then they looked at the phylogeography of the species. So in this figure, I know it's a little hard to see because of text color, but I'd be more than happy to show this image in class again. So they examined the four forma and the species in question. So the four forma are Lima helicina, Lima helicina acuta, L. helicina pacifica, and L. helicina osteotensis. So a study was done by Hunt et al. 2010, as well as Shimizu 2018, and it was found that this species that I'm focusing on, Limacina helicina, is genetically distinct from the other forma, as well as those from the Antarctic. So Limacina helicina antarctica. Try saying that 5 times fast. So these guys are pretty genetically unique. So a cool thing to notice is that they're, instead of having a winged foot like their marine or terrestrial cousins, these gastropods, their parapoda actually, or foot, have evolved into wings, which are used for swimming. So these wings are extremely important in their vertical dual migration, which they perform every day. So a couple of scientists, Chang and Yen in 2012, decided to conduct a study and figure out how these guys swim with their Reynolds number. If you remember, it kind of deals with how animals are moving in the ocean. So their swimming is pretty complex. So in order to actually move around, these animals have to overcome the weight of their shells, which are pretty heavy compared to their body, as well as the asymmetrical nature of their body structure or bow plan to create upward movement. And in addition to that level of complexity, their swimming mechanics depend on the activity that they're doing. The shape of the pathways also change when they swim. So, for example, when they're doing just ordinary swimming, as you can see in this figure here, they ascend or go up along the sawtooth trajectories. It's kind of like jagged, kind of like oop, 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 like that, in mostly linear paths. And the stroke cycle in these guys, so actually getting them to go up, causes oscillations in body orientation. So these guys kind of turn themselves around with each stroke. And sinking has smooth, straight descent. So here in this figure, you can see the stroke cycle of large tethered helicina. So in this study, they had free swimming and tethered helicina, and they took pretty much photographs and analyzed these guys for their swimming patterns. So in this figure, this is studying large tethered helicinas from the recovery stroke. So this is what their stroke cycle pretty much looks like. If you want to see this in more zoomed in, just let me know at the end of the Q&A. So there are 3 basic components to their swimming patterns, which is rowing, flying, as well as kind of like flinging themselves. A level of rotation goes into their swimming, as you can see here. And they also found something pretty interesting. So they found what's called a clap and fling movement, which is found in other small invertebrate animals that also fly, for lack of a better word. So they found it pretty interesting that these guys were doing something similar to those organisms. So let's learn a little about the life cycle. So these guys have a really interesting life cycle. So they spawn in late summer and autumn. So the peak spawning period is about August. So 2 to 6 days after spawning, villagers hatch and start feeding pretty much right away. So as they hatch and they feed, villagers develop into young juveniles during winter towards spring. In the summer, juveniles finally develop into adults. And what's cool is that this species is a protandric hermaphrodite. So they start off as male and then later develop into females. So they develop into males in early summer, and then they develop into females by about July, August, and then the whole cycle repeats itself. So the whole cycle lasts about a year. So again, this species is a protandric hermaphrodite, so males first, then females. And what's cool about their eggs is they're actually arranged on a ribbon, so it's pretty easy to study spawning patterns that way. So they have all this going on. How in the heck do they feed? Well, their feeding is very interesting. So like other marine creatures, they utilize a mucus net to filter feed on phytoplankton, zooplankton, and even their own kind. Studies have shown they've even eaten forms of their own juveniles. And another cool thing about their diets is that they shift depending on what season they're in. So for example, in summer and autumn, their diet shifts to dinoflagellates and then etc. So here this figure depicts kind of their what they eat. So this is kind of studying their stomach contents. So these guys are actually active predators, which is really interesting. You don't often see that. So in addition to being great predators, they also play really important roles. So they're important prey route for ecologically and economically important fish species, those that are concerned in the marine fisheries industry, and they comprise the diets of birds and whales. So these guys play a pretty big role in the pelagic ecosystem. But there's one more thing you need to know about these guys. They play a pivotal role in carbon flux and energy transfer in the pelagic ecosystem. It's been estimated that pteropods contribute about 20 to 42% towards global carbon reduction. So these little guys have a big impact. So this unfortunately brings me to the real subject of my talk, which is how these guys are affected by ocean acidification. So unfortunately, these guys are key indicator species of ocean acidic ocean conditions, So these guys, we can see the effects of ocean acidification. And in the California current ecosystem, which experiences upwelling, it's been found that it's already experiencing acidic conditions. So how do these guys fit into this whole thing? So their shells are made of aragonite, which dissolves in acidic conditions. So what happens is ocean acidification causes aragonite undersaturation, which particularly affects the shells of juveniles. So this is a disaster because these shells are really important to these guys. Their shells are used for protection and for performing their vertical migration. So weaker shells mean they're not going to make it to adulthood, and their life cycle is pretty much disrupted, and they will experience huge population decreases. It's been shown that these animals undergo a population decrease. There will be a lot of dramatic changes in the pelagic ecosystem. So there'll be a lot of trophic cascading, especially with those fishery species, which help feed humans all over the world. It'll collapse fisheries. It's really bad. So there needs to be further research into showing how these guys will deal with ocean acidification, because a lot of studies focus on juveniles. it's been shown that adults will be okay, but there still is not enough evidence to back that claim up. So this is my talk of the day. Down in here, I have my works cited. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask me at the Q&A, but I hope you found this to be informative. And again, don't hesitate to ask me any questions. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much for listening.